I first met Ken about 10 years ago, and we met up every couple of weeks until he went back to Japan last year. Now, when I first met him, he spoke almost no English at all. He'd obviously done a bit at school. He could read and, well, read. He knew the letters of the alphabet. He knew the days of the week and numbers and one or two words like house and friend, but it was impossible to hold a proper conversation with him, or even a very simple conversation was impossible. Anyway, after several meetings, 4 or 5 months, I decided I ought to be teaching him English, of course, so I took along some of my games from racing to English. When he realised I wanted to teach him English, this look of panic went right across his face, and he said, and these are his exact words, "You talk 5 minutes, no." And what he meant was, of course, if I teach him something, he'll hear it, he'll remember it for a minute or two, but then it'll go, and please, please don't teach me English. So I didn't. And it took, years, maybe 2-3 years later, before that panic began to disappear and it became clear to him that he was learning English. And gradually his English increased, but he did learn in a very odd way, because he was working in a Japanese restaurant, speaking Japanese most of the time, but every so often some English would pop up. And I remember the waitress's son. He was about 8 at the time, and the waitress kept saying to him, "Don't be silly, don't be silly." So Ken asked me, what does "don't be silly" mean? Yes, it means small crazy, by the way. Silly does. We talked in a sort of patois, very, very simple English, I know, see you next week, that sort of thing. But gradually, as the years went by, his English did develop, and soon he began to feel more confident. He began to know that he actually was learning. And you could see him sort of standing tall. And then, about 4 years ago, he began to want to learn English and kept asking me and beginning to learn more and more English. But because it was very situational, he didn't learn in a nice logical way. He was just learning a bit here and a bit there. Lovely to see him, though, and lovely to be able to talk to him properly without using a translator. But the most important thing I want to talk about is the look of panic that went across his face, because that is a normal reaction of many, many people who are learning another language, especially if they're dumped in that language. And anyway, so lots of the children we're teaching will be feeling that panic, even if they don't show it. Not all of them, of course. Some will be very confident, but some will be really having a crisis of self-confidence. And we have a silent period sometimes when children will say nothing. Sometimes not only for days, but weeks, sometimes months. Now, that's quite normal up to a point. Now, I think in terms of 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks, if you've got a child in a safe environment, quiet, and they know you, then they should be responding to you. Maybe not by talking, but at least responding positively. And if there are some problems after 6 weeks, I would begin to collect evidence. Have they got hearing problem? Have they got sight problems? Is there some trauma at home? Are they being bullied? Have they got learning needs? Just the sort of thing, begin to look out for that. But for some children, it's quite normal to be silent for 6 months or more and then suddenly take off. The underlying message, of course, is that we need to be aware of our pupils' emotions and the pressures that are on them, and begin to realise that those pressures are very different from the ones that we're feeling, and possibly very different from any that we've experienced.